commitments you're going to make isn't your equipment, your payroll, or even your build out. It's your lease. And if you've ever read a commercial lease before, let me warn you, it can feel like it's written in another language. You've got base rent, you got triple net, you got CAM, you got personal guarantees, tenant improvements, rent commencement, renewal options. What does it all mean? Well, today I'm going to break down the most common parts of a commercial lease in plain English. And more importantly, explain what you should be paying attention to before you even sign one. And just a disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I'm just a salon owner sharing what I've learned from negotiating commercial leases over the years. Always have a qualified commercial real estate attorney review your lease before you sign it. Welcome to All About Hair with Denise. This is where we talk about hair, confidence, and why a good hair day can seriously change your whole mood. It's like hanging out and chatting about life, feeling good, and loving your hair. No pressure, no perfection. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk about loving your hair and yourself a little more. Before you even get that big-ass, giant 60-page lease, you're going to usually negotiate something called an LOI, or letter of intent. Think of it as like the outline of the deal. It basically has how much rent you're going to pay, how long the lease is going to be, your annual rent increases, tenant improvement money if you get any, free rent if you get any, your renewal options, your personal guarantees, when does your rent actually begin, and what you're allowed to use the space for. The letter of intent is where a lot of the negotiating happens before the lease even starts. And here's something that's super important you might want to pay attention to. Don't assume something will magically get better when the actual lease arrives. If something matters to you, you want to make sure you're negotiating it in the letter of intent before you even get to the lease stage. If that air conditioner that might be 20 years old and you think it might be on its last leg and you don't want to replace it, you better have it in your letter of intent that you want the landlord to either replace the HVAC system, I doubt if they will, or at least have it in good working order, and maybe have them promise that if it goes out within the first year of your business, that maybe they'll take care of the cost. I don't know. Put something in there if that's one of your concerns. Another concern might be, how long do you want to build out? Do you want some free rent when you're building out? Do you think your build out's going to be 3 months, 6 months? Negotiate that in. See if you can get some free rent while you're actually building out and not producing income. That is huge. Now, you'll probably have to pay the CAM fees, the triple net, things like that, and we'll get into that. Like, you're going to write a letter of intent to the property management or the landlord, whoever you're dealing with, saying, I'm interested in this spot. Here's what I plan on doing. Here's what I would like to see, things like that. They'll come back to you with their letter of intent, and then you could go from there. Okay, number 2, your base rent isn't necessarily actual rent. This is probably one of the biggest surprises, especially for first-time commercial rentees or tenants. You might see a space advertised like $30 per square foot, and you think, okay, I can calculate my rent. Well, not quite, because commercial rent is actually quoted as an annual price per square foot. So if, say, your space is 2,000 square feet and it's $30 per square feet, you would take 2,000 times 30, that equals $60,000 per year, and divide that by 12. That's $5,000 per month. That's just your base rent, though. You might still have some additional expenses on top of that, which brings us to triple net. What does NNN, or triple net lease, mean? This actually means that you're going to be paying rent plus your share of 3 additional property expenses: property taxes, building insurance, and common area expenses. These common area expenses are often referred to as CAM, C-A-M, or common area maintenance. And these can include things like your parking lot maintenance, landscaping, exterior lighting, snow removal, trash, property management, maintenance of shared areas, all kinds of things, okay? So if your base rent is $5,000 a month, your actual occupancy cost might be $6,000 or $6,500 a month after your triple net expenses. That's why I never want someone asking, what's the rent? I want you asking, what's my total estimated monthly cost? Huge difference, okay? You also want to watch out for the annual rent increases. This is huge. I remember one of my salons, I guess I just didn't catch it. We had, well, I think we did our annual rent increases. We capped it at 3% every year, but we forgot to cap the triple net, and it went up probably every quarter. I tell you what, that first year in that space, I was losing my mind. I actually had this graph that just kept going up, 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 up. Ugh, ugh. Anyway, your starting rent isn't necessarily what you're going to be paying 5 years from now. I've only had one lease in my 35 years of doing hair that my rent didn't increase. They were wonderful landlords. I mean, and I think we were great tenants too. And they didn't have camp fees either. They just had a base rent. Very rare, very rare. Okay, so most commercial leases include some kind of annual increase called escalations. That's the word you want to look for. And it could be just, like I said, 3% every year. And that doesn't sound like much. But over 7 or 10 years, it starts adding up. You think about it. 3% on this year, it goes up to this. 3% on this year goes up to this. 3% on that year goes up to this. So don't just calculate what you can afford in year 1. You want to look and forecast out year 3, year 5, year 7, and make sure that your business model still works. Tenant improvement allowance, or TI. This is one of my favorite things to negotiate. You'll usually see it as tenant improvements, TI. Basically, the landlord gives you money toward improving the space for your business. So if you're opening a salon, you're going to need plumbing, electrical, flooring, lighting, walls, bathrooms, HVAC modifications. Maybe your ceiling needs work. That can get very expensive very quickly. A landlord might offer you $25,000, $50,000, $75,000, or just calculate the allowance based on the square footage. But understand exactly how this works up front. Is it paid up front, or do you submit invoices and get reimbursed? When is it paid? And what improvements qualify? Do you have to use their contractor? Is there a deadline? Those details matter. Number 6, free rent doesn't always mean free. So you might negotiate 6 months free rent. Great, right? But ask this question: free from what? Sometimes it's 6 months of base rent abatement, but you're still responsible for the CAM fees, the taxes, and the insurance, that triple net, right? So you're not actually paying zero. So you need to budget for the triple net if you get 6 months free. So when does your rent actually start if you get 6 months free? This is a big one if you're building a salon. Let's say you get possession on the 1st of the month, September 1st in this case, okay? But you need to get permits, you need plumbing, you need electrical, you need inspections, you have construction, you've got equipment to order and install. What happens if you can't open until January? Are you going to be paying full rent while you're still under construction? Your lease should clearly define your rent commencement date. Ideally, you want enough time to complete your construction or your build out without paying your full rent. This is an area where the exact wording in your lease becomes extremely important. Now, what about that personal guarantee? This is something that every business owner needs to understand. You may be creating an LLC to protect yourself legally, right? But then the landlord says, great, now personally guarantee that lease. What does that mean? If your business can't pay the lease, the landlord may be able to come after you personally, depending on the terms of that guarantee. And on a long commercial lease, that's potentially a very large obligation. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't sign one, but personal guarantees, they can sometimes be negotiated. For example, you might negotiate a burn-off. And a burn-off, that just means that you've successfully paid your rent for 3 years without defaulting on anything, and the personal guarantee goes away. Or perhaps the amount you're personally responsible for decreases over time. Don't just see personal guarantee and assume it's non-negotiable. Ask. The worst they can say is no, right? All right, what about those renewal options? Okay, let's say you build an amazing salon. Okay, wonderful, right? And you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and you establish a clientele, and then 7 years later, the lease expires. Now what? That's why I like having renewal options. You want to negotiate these up front. You might have 1 5-year option or 2 5-year options. That gives you the right to potentially remain in the space under the terms established in your lease. Okay? But look carefully at how that rent's going to be calculated during those renewal periods. Okay? Now, who is responsible for what? This section can get expensive. Who fixes the HVAC if it dies? Have you thought about that? Who repairs the plumbing? Who's responsible for the roof? How about the electrical, the windows, the doors, the structural problems? Don't assume it's their building, so they'll fix it. That'll catch you. Commercial leases don't actually work that way. The lease may make the tenant responsible for things that you don't normally expect to be responsible for. And replacing a commercial HVAC can be very expensive. Trust me, I know. So, what are you actually allowed to do in the space? This is called permitted use. If you're opening a salon, don't make this too narrow if you can avoid it, okay? Today, you might only offer hair services, but what happens 3 years from now if you want to add extensions, scalp treatments, makeup, other beauty service, waxing? Maybe you want to add on facials or massage. You don't want to discover that your lease prevents you from expanding your services if you wanted to. Think about the business you're building and not just the business you're opening. Okay, how about exclusivity? This is another great question to ask. Can your landlord rent the space next door to another salon? What about a blow-dry bar or a color bar or a beauty concept? Sometimes you can negotiate an exclusive use clause that prevents the landlord from leasing to a direct competitor, if you will. Okay, because you don't want another salon right next door. But sometimes you can't. But again, you got to ask for these things. You'd be amazed how many things in a commercial lease are negotiable if you just ask. Okay, how about signage? Okay, never assume you can put whatever sign you want up on a building. Find out, where can your sign go? How large can it be? Who approves the design of the sign? Who pays for it? Are there monument signs? Can you put graphics on the window? What does a shopping center allow if you're in a shopping center? And what does a city allow? Visibility matters so much. So you want to make sure that you understand your signage rights right up front. Here's another one people skip over. It's assignment and subleasing. What happens if you decide to sell your salon? Can the new owner just take over your lease? Can you assign the lease to them? Does the landlord have to approve the buyer? What if you want to sublease part of your space? You may have no intention of selling today. However, you need to think about your future and your exit strategy before you even begin. Just make sure there's something in there that says you're allowed to do this. Okay, what happens if you default on your lease? Meaning, maybe something goes wrong and you can't afford to pay your rent. Oh, nobody wants to talk about this, right? Because we all go in there thinking, no, this isn't going to happen. But you need to read it anyway, okay? What happens if your rent's late? How many days do you have to correct the problem? What constitutes a default on your rent? What happens if your business closes for whatever reason? What happens if your building is damaged, like a tornado or flood or hurricane? What happens if you can't operate for an extended period? Remember COVID? I don't think I have to remind anybody, but the time to discuss this is before the problem arrives. Sometimes you might have a great landlord. And I know when COVID hit, I had 2 different leases, and one let me not pay the lease through until we were open, and one I had to. So it varies so much, okay? The biggest lesson is that everything is negotiable until it isn't. Here's probably the biggest thing I've learned from negotiating commercial leases. Ask for what you need. They don't have to agree, and you don't have to agree. It's a negotiation, right? And we're trying to create a deal that's best for both parties, right? Remember, you're not just negotiating $5,000 or $6,000 in monthly rent. You are signing a 7-year lease, a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease, and you could be easily committing to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Treat this decision accordingly. So here are 7 questions to ask before you sign any lease. I want you to be able to answer these questions. Number 1, what is my total monthly cost? Not just my base rent. Number 2, how much will my rent increase every year? Number 3, exactly when does my rent begin? Number 4, what is the landlord contributing toward the build out of my salon? Number 5, what repairs and maintenance am I responsible for? Number 6, what am I personally guaranteeing? And number 7, has a commercial real estate attorney reviewed the final lease? If you cannot confidently answer all 7, you are not ready to sign yet. Look, I know because I'm going through this, right? Opening a salon is so exciting. There is so much to be done. You start imagining the stations and the color bar and your team and your clients and that opening day when everything just finally comes together, right? But before any of that happens, you have to make sure that the business underneath of it is financially sound. And that starts with the lease. So don't be intimidated by a commercial lease or commercial real estate terminology. Learn what the words mean. Ask questions. Negotiate. Run the numbers. And surround yourself with professionals who understand commercial real estate, because the goal isn't just to open a beautiful salon. The goal is to build a salon that is profitable enough to stay open for a very long time. And remember this, when you know better, you do better. And if you're following along as we build our salon, Panache & Company, make sure you subscribe to this channel because I'm documenting the whole process, including all the decisions that have to be made. And as I'm doing this right now, we are just waiting for our letter of intent to come back so we can go into the final stages of that lease that I'm talking about. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to like this, and I hope that you learn things along the way, just like I'm doing.